Hi, and welcome everyone. It's a great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Ms. Thereasa Black. In addition to being a veteran and legal professional, Ms. Black is the founder and CEO of Amore Congelato in Arlington, Virginia. Amore Congelato is a healthy gelato shop she created to be closer to her daughter after being deployed for 13 months. Ms. Black has channeled this love, care, and dedication to Amore Congelato by not only serving gelato made with good, wholesome ingredients, but also by educating her customers on criminal justice reform when they purchase a pint of her ice cream. All right, and I'm just gonna start and ask my first question. What inspired you to create Amore Congelato?
Honestly, I was inspired by the pain that I felt while I was deployed. It was my fourth deployment, so I was in the military at this point 10 years, and I have been on 4 deployments. This is my fourth. That was my fourth one, and all the other ones were nothing compared to how difficult this one was. This was my first one away from my daughter, and she was, like I said, she was about to turn 2. And so when I left, I can't explain to you how horrible I felt every single day. I spent my entire life hoping that, with the goal of never, it's hard to explain. My mom was always working. And so when I grew up, I understood that she was doing that to help us. But I always made a promise to myself that when I grew up, I was not going to do that to my child. And then to have to leave my baby for 13 months was heartbreaking, not only because I was away from her, but because I was breaking that promise, and that I felt like I was betraying her, because she couldn't understand why I was leaving. And so I decided right then that I could never, ever do that again. And the only way not to do that again was to get out of the military. And so I had to find a way to get out and still be able to spend time with her and like take care of her the way I wanted. And the only way to do that, I felt, was to start my own business. And so that's what I did.
Well, it's a really good story. First of all, I want to say thank you for your service. Yeah. I noticed that in your businesses, you actually, on the pints of ice cream, you have information about criminal justice reform in terms of cash bail and public defenders. Where did you get inspired to share stuff like that on your ice cream?
So maybe you don't know this about me. I started running for Congress back when I was right after law school, and I had to drop out because I got deployed, mysteriously deployed, or unexpectedly deployed. Let's just say it that way. And ever since I was younger, I've always wanted to make a change to the system. I always felt that there was something wrong with it. I did a lot of research when I was little. Sounds crazy, but I used to research the death penalty and all those things. And the idea that a system could be so biased against its own people, in my mind, ever since I was younger, it meant that something needed to change. And so when I was running for office, I was planning on fighting that change. Making those changes. And that's also the reason I went to law school to begin with. But when I realized how our political system, even though I had to drop out, I saw even from the beginning that it's not made for people who actually want to make changes. It's made for people who have money. And I felt that when I started my company, I still wanted to accomplish the mission of changing our system and changing the injustice. And so I figured that having these facts in all of my pints was a way to do that. Because I was sitting down with my cousin after I got back from deployment, and I was talking to him about just the injustices, like the difference between a person who goes to jail for drugs and a person who goes to jail for rape, and how it doesn't make any sense how a person is more harshly penalized for being addicted to drugs than they are for raping a child. These things just don't make any sense. And he was just telling me, he's like, I didn't even know that was a reality. I didn't know that. And so that a light bulb went off in my head, and I was just like, maybe that's why people don't demand change. Maybe that's why no one's talking about it, because people just don't know. And so I decided to use my platform, which was going to be my pints, to make sure that everyone did know.
Dang, that's really interesting. I also, when I was on your website, I actually learned a lot from it. I actually purchased a pint of ice cream or gelato quite recently. So thank you for all that you're doing. I wanted to ask, how has your background as a Black businesswoman shaped your experience and drive at Amore Congelato?
How's my experience as a Black woman shaped my experience at Amore Congelato?
Yes.
So the realities are, I've had I had a crazy childhood. Growing up, I grew up in a town called Lebanon, Pennsylvania. I lived in an apartment complex. When I was growing up, right in my backyard, they had a KKK rally. Um, I grew up being called all types of racial slurs. I remember one day I was walking down the street and two guys in a pickup truck drove past me. They saw me on the street and they slammed on their brakes, did a U-turn in the middle of the street and came speeding back towards me, and I had to run home, terrified for my life. And I think that just growing up and seeing all these things and experiencing all these things, I wouldn't necessarily say it shapes my doesn't shape my business, I don't think, per se, except that it helps me to understand people. And it helps me to understand like that things really do need to change. And I feel that every single day when I have a customer come to my store and every single day when I speak to them, we talk about life. And I talk to them about their lives. I ask them how they're doing. Because I think that a lot of reasons that things don't really change is that people don't talk anymore, really. We talk to people we know, but we don't talk to strangers. And I try to be, at least in the military, I met some kids who told me like, you're the first Black person I've ever met. Some people told me that. Other people told me you're the first Black person in the position of leadership that I've ever met. And so basically my job has always been to be the representative of not my race, obviously, because you can't really do that, but like behave in a way that would shape people who don't experience people like me. They need to have a good representation of what Black women are, what Black women will be, and what they can become. And so not only do I feel that I've taken on the responsibility of being a role model for other little girls, not just Black, just little girls in general, but I feel like I've taken on that responsibility to just show people like, this is what we are, this is who we are, and this is what we will become. And I feel that every single day when I meet people and when I interact with them, that's what I'm trying to put out. So I'd say that my experience has taught me one thing, that I feel that racism is caused by ignorance. So basically, they only know what they know, and you have to be the thing that they find out. So I feel that I'm an educational tool, and I try to use that to my advantage every day.
No, thank you. I'm already also feeling that from, especially we just talked about how much you share about criminal justice reform. I'm noticing that a lot in your business. That's something that, thank you, that's a lot to. So where do you see your business going in the future in terms of criminal justice reform, or just how you decide to run it in general?
As I continue to grow, I mean, honestly, right before COVID happened, I was actually trying to partner with some women's shelters, radical women's shelters, in order to give women, a lot of times when women leave their home, the reason it took so long for them to leave is because they haven't been working for an extended period of time and they don't have an income. And so I was trying to work with battered women's shelters to give a position to women who are coming out of those situations so that they could not only have a job and have an income, but also have a place that they can bring their kids. Because I'm a single mom and I bring my daughter with me to work whenever she wants to come. Right now, my mom is helping me because of COVID, and I don't really want to bring her here. But before that, my daughter was here every day. Every day that I was here, my daughter was right here with me. And I have a little setup for kids so that she can hang out and play with toys and like color and just all that, so that she feels comfortable here, but also other parents feel comfortable bringing their children here as well.
That's really nice. I actually had no idea that's a really good initiative to start. I didn't even think about that.
I'm also actually, as I get bigger, I'm going to eventually start donating to ACLU, Corporation of Profits to ACLU, because the work that they do is so beneficial to society.
That's amazing. What can we as consumers do to best support Black-owned and operated businesses, in your opinion?
I mean, the reality is that Black-owned businesses makes up such a small percentage of businesses just generally. You can seek them out. I mean, there's different websites that have that support Black-owned businesses that you can go to and order their things. You can get lists of Black-owned businesses from different locations. But I mean, the reality is that you need to demand from the stores that you shop at. So if you go to Whole Foods, if you go to Walmart, you go to the Targets, you go to JCPenney's, you need to demand from these corporations that they bring on more Black retailers. more Black vendors. Like, I think a big problem is that we're not represented because they don't want to represent us and don't have to, and no one's forcing the issue. It took affirmative action to get a higher percentages of Black people into certain jobs, into certain universities, and we don't have that when it comes to retail. Like, there's no requirement. You don't have to have this percentage, so people just don't. And the reality is that a lot of our businesses are smaller. We don't have the resources, and we don't have the connections as far as like friends that, oh, my friend works for Walmart. Like, you know what I mean? My friend is in the executive portion of these places. And because there's a lack of representation, same thing as happens everywhere else, there's a lack of diversity. And so, I mean, the best thing you can do is demand from those retailers that they bring on retailers that are of color, people of color.
No, completely. My next question is, how did you deal with any setbacks or hardships that you might have faced as a business owner?
It's a complicated answer. I just keep on trying. I mean, let's take Whole Foods, for example. Back in December, so Whole Foods has a local program so that they take on local vendors. And I was working with Shivani, who has an incubator program, and they had one specifically for veterans that I was accepted into. And so at their meeting, they brought in the person who's responsible for the entire local program in all of America for Whole Foods. And she tried my gelato. And after she tried it, she's like, we need to get you into the stores, like into our stores. And she's gave me the contact information for the people that are local to my area that work for Whole Foods. And so I got back and I contacted them, and they immediately told me, oh, no, that's not us. I mean, it is us, but you have to go to the individual stores and ask them to if they're willing to take you into their stores. And so I did that. I went to 4 stores, and all 4 of them tasted my gelato, and they all said, oh yeah, we'll bring you in. I then went back and said, okay, they said they'll bring me in, now what? And then they're like, oh, wait, no, that wasn't the end of it. Now they have to fill out some paperwork and submit it. And so I go back to these people, and I'm like, hey, she says you have to fill out the paperwork. And they're like, I've never heard of this before. Like, you never heard of the paperwork? Like, I don't know how to submit it. I've never been told to submit it, and I don't know how to do it. All of them said this. And so I went back to her, and then we went back and forth for a little while. Finally, one of the guys said, okay, I'll do it. It takes a long time, but I'll do it. So they did the paperwork, and they submitted it. And they accepted the paperwork, and they said, okay, send in your products. And they said, but you can't bring it. You just send it in. And so I send it in, and then maybe a month later, a little bit less than a month later, they come back to me and they say, we're not taking your products into Whole Foods. And I said, I was like, after these 4 stores said that they would take my products, they said no. And so I asked them, like, what's the reason for this? I got no answer. Right? And so a lot of people would just say, all right, let's just move on to the next place, right? But I'm like, no, this isn't, I don't know what's going on, but like, this isn't gonna be the end of it, right? So I just continued to work at it. I found people who had connections to Whole Foods that were in different positions, and I contacted them, and they said, oh, well, let me see if I can do something. So one person sent an email to that woman, and she said, hey, I think you need to really try this product. You need to bring it to the stores. And the same woman said, well, no, I already told her that we didn't accept it for this reason, this reason, and this reason. And which was a complete fabrication, because they had completely ignored my email when I asked why they didn't accept me in. And so I told the woman, like, I don't know what she's talking about, but I want you to come into my store and try my gelato, and then you go back and you tell me what you think. So she came in and she tried it. She said, this is amazing. I'm going to stand up, like, I'm going to take care of this. And so she went back and she sent them another email, and she said, hey, listen, this is the deal. And they came back and they said, oh, okay, yeah, we'll do another review. We'll review it again. We'll check it out again. So as of right now, I'm still not officially accepted into Whole Foods, but they did say that they'll re-review me. There's been some complications, as in, I called the man who was going to be submitting the paperwork again, and he was told by someone at that same office not to submit it. And I don't know if this was before or after the conversation, but I'm pretty sure it was after, because he said he talked to them that same day that I called him. So I'm not saying that it's race related, but it's a complication that doesn't make any sense. And how am I going to solve it? I'm going to keep trying.
What advice would you give to people or future entrepreneurs who are in a similar situation where they're kind of meeting a lot of roadblocks? What would you say to keep them motivated and just keep them going?
Just find another way. There's always another way. The person who you're dealing with is never the top person. They never are. You can always find a way around them. And so the answer is that's always going to be go around them. And like that's how I lived my entire life. It's just if one person tells you no, if it doesn't make it, like sometimes like it's legit, like you know what I mean. Sometimes it's a legitimate reason that they're saying no. But if you don't believe that it is, find another way and keep trying. Because I mean, as an entrepreneur, people are going to tell you no, especially when you're a small company. A lot of people tell you no, a lot of people. And so your job is just going to be to pivot, figure out another idea, and then keep going, keep moving, and don't stop.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you. I had a question in terms of COVID-19. A lot of small businesses are, you know, they're evolving and they're changing their business models to adjust with the changing times. How is Amore Congelato adjusting to COVID-19?
So I started selling online. I wasn't doing that before.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been doing deliveries as well. So I was not doing that either. And I'm delivering to all of Nova. So literally, I deliver 3 days a week now. At the very beginning, I was delivering every day, which became way too much to handle. But I added on delivery services. And what I do is at the end of the day, when I close, I pack up all the gelato and then I go house to house in 4 different counties and I deliver my gelato so that I can keep my doors open.
Just you alone?
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's insane. Thank you. Yeah. I had a question in terms of we started how your daughter kind of inspired your business, and I just want to go deeper into that on asking how did your daughter inspire like other elements of your business like after you started up?
How did what?
How did your daughter inspire other elements of your business after you started up?
Other elements. I mean, the reality is that I made a product, right? I didn't know how to make ice cream. I never made gelato before. I learned. I learned for her, and I have pivoted a lot actually since I began. So when I first started off, I took out all the cane sugar of my product, but I was sweetening with a different sweetener. And then I found another sweetener that was going to be more like make it actually healthy, make it good for her. And so I added that product. You know what I mean? I started sweetening with that. And then, I mean, right now, a lot of people understand like a lot of people trying to get away from dairy because it's not necessarily good for their bodies. But I mean, it is, and it isn't. It depends on like how much you're consuming of dairy. And so now I added on oat milk gelato. And then only recently, actually, I just reformulated my formula so that my oat milk gelato tastes exactly like regular ice cream. So you can't tell it, honestly, you can't tell the difference. At least I can't tell the difference. And I had my employees try it. And I know they work for me, but I tell them that don't lie to me. Tell me the truth. If it tastes bad, tell me so I can fix it. Like I won't get mad. And so they said thumbs up. Like they like it. And I started sending it out to different people who are vegans. And they're just like, I can't believe this doesn't have any milk in it. And so I feel that my inspiration, honestly, she is my inspiration to keep going. Because some days I do feel like, why am I doing this? I do ask myself that question, like, why this is so difficult. So I'm working every single day. I'm working sometimes 20 hours a day. Sometimes I literally work 24 hours a day. I was waking up, I was working full time before. On Friday nights, I would get home. I would literally be up until it was time for me to drive to the farmer's market, preparing my gelato. And then I wouldn't get back, like after the farmer's market was over, I would go straight to the winery, but I was staying there until 10 o'clock at night. I'd leave there, go home, have to clean everything up, and by the time that I'm finished, I have maybe 1 hour before I have to get up and do it all over again. And then even during COVID, I was working completely by myself, same thing, 20-hour days. And I get home like in the middle of the night. I didn't see her all day. You know, she's the inspiration to tell me to keep going, because at the end of the day, it might be tough right now, but at the end of the day, I'm doing this all for her.
Yeah.
And it's important that I just keep going.
Yeah. That's really good advice, especially to find someone or somebody who gives you a reason to keep on going. And I just want to transition to any entrepreneurs who might be listening today. And I was just wondering, for people who have just an idea, just like a small idea, what advice would you give to them to kind of put their idea into action and such like that?
So I literally spent an entire year in Djibouti figuring out how I was going to work my business, which business was the best one, doing a ton of research, reading a lot of books. And I think that I had a million ideas. Every single day I went to lunch or dinner, I was pitching an idea to my friends that I was sitting with and eating at lunch. And they would say, Thereasa, why do you do this every day? This is like, because I'm determined. Like, I'm going to make a difference, and I'm going to go home and I'm going to do this, but I want to make sure I make the right choice. Because just because I like the idea doesn't mean everyone else is. And just because I like the idea doesn't mean that people are going to buy my product. It doesn't mean that like the market's going to accept it. And so for people that just have an idea, you need to do your research, because I like to tell people that if you have a dream, go for it, run with it. And if it's going to work, it's going to work, and not to give up. But sometimes people have ideas that need to be let go. And a lot of times, if you do the right research, if you do the right market research beforehand, you see where the market's going, you see what your product is, you can change an idea. Like, you have to just do the right amount of research, and then you go with it. You take that idea and you make it into a business. But what I will say is, don't just take an idea that you have and just throw a ton of money into it without checking it out first, like without doing any type of background checks. So like, for example, I mean, the biggest question that any entrepreneur needs to ask is, why would someone choose you over the other guy, right? And it can't be because I'm me. Everyone's gonna love me, so they're gonna choose me over the other person. That can't be your answer. And you have to answer the question, like, what makes you different? Not you, but your product, your idea, your invention. Like, what is different about it? And that's gonna be a key idea, because I mean, I talk to people a lot now that tell me, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. Oh, okay, well, what kind of entrepreneur do you want to be? I don't know. I was like, all right, well, then you have to figure out what you like as a person, like what you want to do, and then figure out what, like, if you want to focus in that area. You know what I mean? Like, it has to just grow on it. Like, I love cooking. I love baking. Sorry, correction. I love to bake. But I wasn't going to open a bakery when I got back home, because, I mean, there are a million bakeries. What's going to make my bakery different than someone else's? And the answer could have been, I don't use any sugar in any of my products. I mean, that is an answer, right? I could have run with that. But I looked at the market, and I saw where the market was going, and I decided that was not the way I needed to go. And so I came up with the ice cream idea, partly because ice cream was the last thing that me and my daughter ate together before I deployed, but also because it made more sense.
Yeah. And after doing this research and kind of doing a lot of market research and figuring out what differs your product as compared to others, what were some next steps that you took to actually start, sorry, I'm finding the words, to bring into fruition and such?
So I researched cottage food laws at first, because I'm making food, and I looked at the cost of commercial kitchens first. And then I realized, I already knew this because I researched before, but cottage food laws will allow any food business to make their food at their house at the beginning, as long as they get certified. And that's the cheapest and best way to first start your business, because you don't have to throw in like, when you sign up for a commercial kitchen, it's usually a year-long contract. And if your product doesn't make it a year, then you're still paying all that money. So I looked into the cottage food laws, made sure I'm moving to a new state. So I looked up the state laws. I found I did research about like what the policies were for getting certified, what I needed to do as a business just generally to get certified in my state, if I needed to do anything else. And I'm also a lawyer, right? So I looked into trademark, I looked into copyright, like all those things, and patenting, everything, just to make sure that I was going in the right direction. I needed to be ready. Like insurance, you need insurance for your business. You know what I mean? I looked up all that stuff. And then after that, after I got my bank account in line, started getting certifications, you know? So I did everything I could before I got home, and everything I needed to do after I got home, I did it then. So it was basically just looking at my field and what the requirements were federally, but also statewide. statewide to make sure I could launch my company when I got back to my house. And honestly, my plan at the beginning was to march by the first week of July, and that's what I did. I got back in May and launched by July 6th. So.
Just a personal question that I had. Because you are a lawyer and you have this background, in addition to donating to the ACLU and hiring women from the women's shelter, do you plan on doing any legal advocacy of any sort?
So when I was in law school, I actually decided that I wanted to become a public. I went to law school to become a public defender, and then I didn't end up doing that because I read this case my first year of law school that broke my heart, and I literally was crying while I was reading this case. And I realized that if I ever got a case like that, I could not defend the person, and that wasn't going to be fair for that individual, because I do believe everyone deserves a competent defense. But I knew also that I could not be the person that defended people that did the crime that he had committed.
Yeah.
And so I think, and then my first summer of law school, I worked at a public defender's office defending clients. And then my third year of law school, sorry, I did an entire year of working as a public defender, essentially. I was a student attorney, so I was actually able to take on my own cases and work with people who couldn't afford a regular attorney or a paid attorney. And I don't know. I don't think that, I mean, there's no way I can do it right now. There's no way that I have time to do it right now. And I don't think that as a CEO of a company, I'm gonna have time to do it either. If I do decide, because I have licensed attorney, so I can practice. If I do decide to go back into law, I could. I wanted to actually work with ACLU, but I'm not experienced enough to qualify to work for them. But we'll see. I don't know. I haven't made up my mind about where I'm going to go with the legal field yet.
Yeah, that was just a personal question that I had, just because your background was so interesting. I just want to make sure I asked that. And then just a couple of last questions. We saw that you had actually written a few books, and we're wondering if your business had inspired any of the books that you wrote.
Short answer, no. Those books, so my one book called Therea's Hope, that book I actually started writing a long time ago. I just finished it while I was on deployment. So I was an African American Studies minor when I was in college. So I did a lot of research about African American. I mean, like just how Black people are, not just Black people, but how America sees us and how America responds to us, and things like that. And then I also, when I was in high school, my senior year of high school, I made a documentary called The Educational Color Line. And it's about how a lack of education about different cultures leads to racism. It is the cause of racism in our country that we are not educating children about other races and people. We only talk about the Western world and mainly talk about white America. And so my book, Therea's Hope, is about a family. It doesn't actually. So I made a very direct decision not to actually just divulge the race of the people in the story. But it's about a family that lives in Philadelphia, in North Philly, and about all the struggles that they're going through. Because people always ask me when I was growing up, like, well, how did you make it? Like, if you made it, everybody can make it. Like, that's not accurate. Everyone doesn't have the same situation. Even people that are living in the same household who have the same upbringing, they can end up in completely different areas because each person's individual experience is different. And even trauma, everyone experiences trauma differently. And so that's what that book is about. It's about a family, and it lets you see how each individual in that family is experiencing the trauma that's going on in their household. And it lets you understand why people react differently. And it really literally breaks it down because it's written in the viewpoint of each individual that is experiencing that trauma. And so that was not inspired by my business, but it was inspired by my background in African American studies and also just life. It has nothing. My life is nothing. I mean, it's not mirroring my life at all. Actually, I don't know anyone that lived in that type of experience, but I do know that based on my research, this is the question people ask. These are the answers that people ask a lot. So I saw a question. Hold on, but I couldn't read the whole thing. What made me choose to locate my business in Virginia? Honestly, I came to Virginia because I was living in Maryland before so like I said, I lived in a very racist town growing up, and I have a daughter, and my daughter is half white, half black, and I know the experience I know the experience that I had growing up, and I did not want my daughter to experience the same thing. So when I lived in DC during law school, I realized that like DC is different than anywhere else I've ever lived, and anywhere else I've ever even visited, in that they accept people, that people are accepted here. And so I made the decision to have my daughter grow up in this area. And then it became an issue of schools. So I started looking for schools, and the best schools that I could afford were in Virginia. So that's where I ended up living. And just as far as why did I locate my business here, is because it was just, I lived here. So I was using cottage food laws, and you actually live at your house in order to do that. So it was just based on convenience. And then how long did it take for you to fully start up after you came back from deployment? So I got back, I moved into my house in May. I spent pretty much all of May just trying to just reunite with my daughter, if that makes sense. But what we were doing, I didn't have any of my stuff yet, so all my stuff was still in storage. And so I spent that entire month just getting ready, honestly. So I only spent 1 month after I got back home really devoted to, not even a month actually, maybe 3 weeks really devoted to getting my business ready before I actually launched. So that just tells you how much stuff I did before I got back home. Like I was really prepared to just go, to just run with it. The only thing I did when I got back here, I did a class, I did some experimenting with my product. I figured out the product that I needed. So yeah, I spent about 3 weeks preparing to launch once I got back home, including inspections and all the other stuff as well. And then I see another question here. What kind of reactions do I get to my educational messages on my products? Honestly, I've only gotten good reactions. I've never had anybody get mad, or people actually ask me like, I'm so happy that you have this on your packaging. I'm happy that someone's talking about this. And honestly, so the way that I chose, obviously I have a lot of viewpoints, and I'm very strongly opinionated. The way that I chose what messages to put on my products was based off of trying to find a message that would appeal to the most people. So I didn't want to alienate people. I didn't want people to feel, my entire purpose of having the messages on my product is that so that people take action and people demand change, right? And so I didn't want to put something on my product that was going to cause people to fight with each other, to separate us even more, because reality is that we have more things in common than we do not in common. But people don't realize that because we're too busy arguing about what political party we're in. We're too busy worrying about like the things that we don't agree on. So you don't agree on the death penalty? Well, I do. So now we have to hate each other. You don't agree on abortion? Well, I do. So now we have to hate each other. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to bring people together and to actually try to make a change. And I feel that the only way that we can actually make change is that we work together. And so I chose messages that I felt that everyone could agree with. Like we shouldn't be, if we have a system that is supposed to take care of people that are being accused of crimes and everyone's innocent until proven guilty, and they're constitutionally guaranteed the right to a competent defense, why are we giving that to them? Like, you know what I mean? I felt that nobody's gonna say, oh yeah, they shouldn't get a real defense. Like, no one's gonna say that, right? Or when you say the Constitution says that we're not allowed to have excessive bail, no one's gonna argue that we should go against the Constitution. You know, so there's certain things that I felt that were, and like, no one's gonna argue that being addicted to drugs is worse than raping a child or raping anyone at that matter. No one's gonna make that argument, and yet our laws are made in the way that it says exactly that. So I think that when people see my message, when they actually read it, there's no arguing, there's no anger, there's no outrage that I dare put something on like that on my package. It's always just like, that's 100% correct, and you were 100% right, and I didn't even know that. And that is something we need to change. Let's see. What led me to run for Congress? Honestly, everything that I've been saying this whole time is what led me to run for Congress. When I was younger, I understood that like things were wrong. Like there were things that were wrong in this country, and that people were not on an equal footing, and that needed to change. I honestly, always wanted to run for office. I told myself when I was little that if when I grow up, these things aren't corrected and equality has not been achieved, I'm gonna run for office and make it happen. And so that's what inspired me, is that I got older. And I remember when Barack Obama was elected, I felt, I don't know, I felt hope, you know what I mean? That something was actually, that was his slogan, right? But I felt that something was actually gonna to change. But the reality is that a president doesn't really have the power to change a lot. That's has to be done through Congress, because they're the ones writing the laws, right? I mean, a president can do things through executive order, and he can determine the way that he's going to support the laws that are being written. But reality is that Congress is who writes our country's laws, and I felt that Congress wasn't doing the right thing, and so I ran for Congress in order to make those changes that I felt needed to be made. And when I said it when I was mysteriously deployed, I only said that because I actually worked in the Department of the Navy that mobilizes people for deployments when they're in the reserves. And what always happens is that before a person is mobilized, the secretary has to sign off on it to say, oh yeah, this person is going to go. Well, I worked in that department, and I knew for a fact that when I was informed that I was being mobilized, he had not signed off on it. So anyway, I had to drop out of the race. And will I run for it again? Probably. I anticipate that I will sometime in the future, once I have the financial support to support it and the connections that you actually do in fact need in order to run for office and actually win. So when I have the best chances, I think I'm going to run again.
As we're turning over to questions, and we're going to wait for more oh, wait, no, there's another question. I'm going to let you answer that.
So what kind of changes would you want to make in Congress? So one of the biggest changes I wanted to make was to criminal justice reform. I did a lot of research about this. I mean, growing up, and then also while I was in law school. Hold on a second. I'm sorry, my computer's about to die. But I did a lot of research about like underfunding in public defender's offices, and oh, I don't have my charger. I can switch to my phone if my phone dies, if I cut out. So one of the things I wanted to do was ensure that public defender's offices are actually being funded properly. So obviously, those are decisions that are typically made by states. It's not a federal decision that of how different offices are funded, but the federal government can supply money to offices that don't have enough money. So certain areas, obviously, like all other things, are supplied by taxes, right? So all state programs are funded by state taxes, and when state taxes fall short of doing their jobs, federal funding can come in and make up for that. So that was one of the areas that I was going to try to fix. But then also federal penalties federal penalties, and also funding for federal public defenders also is a problem. And so I was going to make some changes there. But then another thing I was going to do was education. So we know that our education system is not very, it can be great, but it's not. And so one of the areas that I was going, and some of that's because of students, and some of it's because of funding. So I was actually supporting free college for students who had a certain grade point average. This would be 100% free for all of them. And then anyone else who was below that grade point average, they could have free college if they volunteered in a service. So whether that be the military, the Peace Corps, or even just certain volunteer programs that were already pre-selected by the law that was going to be written. Every amount of, basically the way it was going to work was that the number of hours that you commit to community service or to whatever service you're doing, those hours would translate to cash, to money, and that money would go towards forgiving your student loans, and it would be an hour for hour basis. So it was going to be based off of the minimum wage, and the idea behind that was that the minimum wage would increase because the people who were actually controlling the people who were making the laws would demand that the minimum wage increase because they have student loans and they want their loans to be forgiven. And the only way to get student loans forgiven was going to be that, like, you know what I mean, to have that stepping stool. So that was going to help increase minimum wage for people, as well as help people get rid of their student loan debt. Because the reality is that so many Americans, especially those without money, are volunteering all the time, but that volunteer work doesn't benefit them in any like financial way. So people that are giving, that are being able to donate cash, yeah, they can donate cash. They have that money, and they can also pay their loans off. But all these people who don't have cash, that are just donating their time, they should be getting paid for that, right? And so the way that they get paid is by having their student loans forgiven, based off of the work they're doing. And so those were just a couple of things that I was that were my propositions for Congress. But
yeah. As we're waiting for more questions to come in, I just had a question about, you said that you talked a lot to your customers and you're talking a lot about it. Is there a specific interaction that's most memorable where you might have changed your mind or you learned something, anything like that?
I think a lot of the times that a lot of the deeper conversations that I have with customers, we have a lot of, we sometimes we're standing there for hours, just not even hours, but like 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, just talking. And like some people will literally stand here and wait for me to deal with, like, to help other customers so they can continue talking to me. And we talk about kids, we talk about, make decisions about our kids, about being a mom and being a parent just generally, and realizing, like, coming to that realization that you don't spend any time with your kids. Like, you wake up in the morning and you go to work. You're rushing in the morning. That's you see your kids in the morning at night, right? In the morning, you're rushing to get them ready for school, to take them to school, and then you drop them off. You don't see them all day long. By the time you get home, you're cranky, you're upset, you're stuck in traffic, you're tired, you're exhausted. All you want to do is feed them and put them to bed, right? And that's all the time you get, except for on the weekends when you can spend some time. But a lot of that time you're spending time doing chores that you needed to do during the week that you didn't get a chance to do because you were so exhausted. And so the reality is that we're living in a society where we don't really get to spend time with our children. And so we just, I've had a lot of conversations like that with other parents. But I think the most impactful conversation that I've had, I think, have been with military members, because whenever they come, like on my door, it says veteran owned, and I'm right by the Pentagon. So I have a lot of military members coming in, and a lot of young women who, or even young men, honestly, but they come in and I'll ask them if they're in the military because I have a military discount. And then we'll just start talking. Or like, if a lot of people, so military people have a USAA card. It's a bank that only military people can get into, or dependents. And so whenever I see that card, I ask them, hey, are you in the military? And then we start talking. Like, I ask them, like, what are your goals in the military? What are your goals after you get out? And I think a lot of those conversations are most important to me because as an officer in the military, it's my job. Like when I was active duty, like that's what I did every day. Like I was a division officer, and my job is to help people plan for the future, like their futures in the military or their futures as a civilian. And since I've gotten out, I don't get to do that anymore. And so it's nice to still be able to help people to get to the next level in their lives that have gone through the same thing that I've gone through. What advice would you give to your younger self? Honestly, so based off of where I grew up, I had a lot of problems with identity. I was embarrassed to be Black, which sounds crazy. And it wasn't a realization that I realized until I left that town. I didn't know that I was embarrassed. I didn't know that I was ashamed. But I realized that after I left that growing up, I was literally embarrassed. Someone told me, my last name is Black. And so people, like this one kid would always say, hey Thereasa, you're Black. And I would say, no, I'm not, I'm brown. And it's just like, I don't know, I was ashamed. And I didn't dislike the fact that my relatives were Black. I didn't dislike the fact that, people around me were Black. I didn't think that being Black was a bad thing, but I guess I kind of did, but I just didn't know it. And so if I could say something to my younger self, I would say, don't let them discourage you. Be proud of who you are and live every day knowing that you are the best person that you are going to be, and there's nothing wrong with you that you love. And keep on trying. Don't ever let them discourage you. Don't let them second guess yourself. Just be who you are and keep it going. So the other question is, do I have an opinion about defunding or demilitarizing the police? So I will tell you this. I went to a couple of the protests, and the second one that I went to, it was right after the president had ordered the Secret Service to shoot tear gas into a crowd of peaceful protesters. And I went, and there were, obviously that was after the military had been called in, and they were standing up. They were standing out there and guarding the little, like, the space in front of the White House. And people were screaming at the military members. They were screaming at them and calling them all types of names and giving them the finger. And it hit home, honestly. I'm not gonna lie. And at one point I got into an argument with someone because I said, the military's job is to protect the people. They're not going to hurt you. Like, they're not, if they do, they will be court-martialed. I mean, I tried to explain to them, like, these people didn't join the military so they could stand here and prevent you from going up there. They didn't join the military to do this. They're following an unlawful order because technically they have not been given an unlawful order yet. If they were given the order to shoot tear gas at you, that's an unlawful order that they can then choose to do or not to do, hopefully choose not to do, but they are not here to hurt you. They did not sign up to hurt you. It's not to protect you. And so I realized demilitarizing the police, yes, I completely agree with that. While I was in law school, it was actually, everyone got together. When I was working for the clinic that I was in, all the students apparently that were part of this clinic got together and they said, statistically speaking, one of us voted for Trump, and we've decided that it was you. And they made that decision because I was in the military. I think that's the reason they made that decision. And I'm just like, I think at the end of the day, I'm a military member. I am, but I'm Black first at the end of the day. And I don't think being in the military means that I have to support one party or another. Being in the military just means I have to listen to my commanding officer. I don't have to agree with their decisions. I don't have to agree with their political positions. I think that the fact that we're providing military gear, military tanks, military weapons to the police doesn't make any sense at all. And the fact that we're training, I watched a video actually while I was in law school about how we're training our police officers, and we're training them that the people are the enemy. That makes absolutely no sense. If you're going in, like, they're training them to be military. They're training them that anyone that's outside of this little group right here, they're our enemies. We have to fight against them. We have to protect ourselves against them, and that's not how they should be trained. They're being trained to be like they're in the military, and they're not. The people are the people they're supposed to protect, not the people that are supposed to be the enemy. Like, that doesn't make any sense. They're being trained that way. As far as defunding the police, I did not do a lot of research about what they mean by defunding. I did learn later on what they meant by defunding was not. So with the research that I saw, they said that what they meant by defunding was that they want to take money out of the police departments and put money towards having departments created that are going to be like mental health police, if you want to call them. So like a group that will be called if there's a mental health issue. So like if a person who has a mental problem is causing some type of violence, send in this specific group that's specifically trained to respond to mental health issues. If it's this type of other problem, so like say it's a person who wants to commit suicide, which is also a mental health issue, I suppose, but just funding different groups that are made for specific situations. So if it's a situation so we're being robbed. I'm being robbed right now. My house is being broken into. That's when you send the cops. But if it's like, hey, this person is threatening to kill themselves because blah blah blah, you send in the other department. Like, you know what I mean? So I do agree with doing something like that. Completely, I think, but when most people hear defund the police, what they're thinking is take away the money out of the police department. Just flat out defunding the police and not having any type of programs, like not putting it towards a program like the one I was just speaking about, is not a good idea, because the reality is that when we defund the police, the neighborhoods that are going to be most negatively impacted are going to be the ones that are neighborhoods of color. And I think that we need to, I actually wrote demands out. I wrote a list of demands. You can find them on my Instagram page. But they are all demands that I think would actually make a change to the system that we have right now, that it would make a positive change, because it takes the law, let's say, out of the hands of the vigilantes that are running the police departments. Not saying that they're all vigilantes, but the ones that are, it takes the power out of their hands and places it into the hands of the people, or like at least elected officials, right? So that if an elected official makes a decision that we don't agree with. So basically, like one example of this is that anytime a police officer kills a person of color and the prosecutor decides not to prosecute the case, it has to be signed off for by an elected official. So signed off by the state attorney general. And that person's elected. So if they're making these ridiculous decisions that don't make any sense, like the Ahmaud Arbery case, right? He's gonna have to answer to that. But right now we have a bunch of people in police departments that are just like, there's no consequence if you're not doing this. You know what I mean? I'm gonna do what I want. And like the prosecutors of the individual counties, they're obviously the prosecutors for a reason in that county. And not to say that the whole county is racist, but you have to take the power out of the hands of the people who can't be relied on to make an unbiased decision, and put it into the hands of other people who can be relied on. So I think that there are better ways to fix a community. Like actually, I'm from Camden, New Jersey, and Camden, New Jersey actually is one of the key examples of a city that defunded their police department and then succeeded. Like, you know what I mean? Did not have a negative impact, and it actually did work out. So, but I mean, Camden is also very small. So I think that it could work. And who am I to say that it wouldn't? I mean, you know?
I just had one question with your military background. I wanted to see, there's been a lot of back and forth when it comes to kneeling in terms of like the national anthem. And you having military background, I just want to know what you thought about that and what your opinions were.
So on my Facebook page, I actually, when everything first started and everyone was complaining, like everyone was talking about the protests turning into riots and how riot this, riot that, right? And I said, let me get this straight. When Colin Kaepernick and all of the other NFL players and teams decided they were going to kneel during the national anthem, everyone complained. Everyone had a problem with it. You're asking now why you want people, you're saying now, why can't you guys peacefully protest? Well, the answer is that when people peacefully protest, you ignore them. You disdain them and you call them names. You didn't listen. And so when things turn violent, though I don't think that majority of the protests did not turn violent, but when things turn violent, how can you expect anything different when you didn't listen when they were peaceful? I don't think it makes any sense that anyone would be offended by someone kneeling during the national anthem because out of protest, because that's how you protest. Like, what you're not protesting, you're not saying that America, like, you know what I mean? People take it out of context. Like the thing is not to say I hate America. I'm disrespecting the flag. That doesn't make any sense. It's not at all what they're doing. What they're doing is saying we need to change something. And this is how I'm going to tell you that we need to change, is that I'm not going to stand until a change actually happens. When America is the America that it promised to be to all Americans, I won't kneel anymore, right? Because like part of our song, I mean, part of the national anthem is, actually, it's not the national anthem, it's the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag, right? And the part that says, for liberty and justice for all. From the time that I was in elementary school, I stopped saying the pledge because in my mind and in reality, we don't have liberty and justice for all. So I'm not gonna keep saying it as though we do. And until we do, I won't say it again. Because if we're gonna say something, we need to mean it. And if we're meaning it, we actually do mean what we're saying, then we'll fight for it. And we're not doing that right now. And until we do,
yeah,
I don't think that anyone should say the pledge. But I mean, they're going to anyway. But
yeah, I agree. Thank you for your perspective. If no, does anyone have any last questions they want to ask? I think it was.
It was me. I said, "What is?" I could see part of the quote behind you. I just want to know what it says. You lose. You don't lose if you get knocked down. You lose if you stay down.
Yeah. So all around my store, actually, I have quotes, inspirational quotes around my entire store. And the idea was that when people walk in here, I mean, the idea behind it was that every single day when you go somewhere, you're doing something, you get a lot of negativity. And I wanted this to be a place where people can walk in and be immediately inspired. And so I literally have quotes all over my walls.
One more question. Do you have a favorite flavor right now?
My favorite flavor is banana pudding.
Banana pudding. Okay.
I just want to say thank you so much again. This is absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.